Welcome to the Shifted podcast and video series. Each week, we talk to classroom teachers about how their teaching and learning has shifted since the onset of the global pandemic. We delve into classroom practices, daily routines, structures and schedules, digital tips, tools, and tricks that you can use in your classroom right away. Why, hello again. My name is John Hamlin. I work with the Greater Victoria School District here in beautiful Victoria, British Columbia, the capital of our province, and home to the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Songhees, and the Esquimalt Nation. Welcome back to episode 3 of the Shifted podcast and video series. This week, we're delving into the world of French Immersion and Sciences Naturelles with Alexis McKinty from Oak Bay High School. She'll be sharing with us a number of the digital platforms and tools she's been using to engage students with during the remote and hybrid learning period, including a look into her Google Classroom setup and how she's been using a tool called Go Formative to engage students in the assessment process from a remote perspective. If you're listening to this on one of our podcast platforms, consider checking out the video in addition to this when you have time. Alexis will be walking us through a number of her tools and demonstrating what that looks like and how she's been using it with her students. So you might appreciate that firsthand perspective. I really hope you enjoy episode 3. It's been fun making it. If you have any comments or questions, thoughts, or ideas you'd like to share, please do so. You can leave us a voice message at our Anchor FM website. You can access that anchor.fm/shift-ed, and of course that link will be in the show notes as well. In addition to all those things, all the tools that Alexis mentions in this episode will be linked with resources and supports to help get you started with those if you're interested in checking them out for yourself. I hope you enjoy episode 3. Take care. This morning we're talking to Alexis McKinty from Oak Bay High School, and this Zoom conversation is beaming to you live from the lands of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Esquimalt and Songhees Nation, here from the Greater Victoria School District. So good morning, Alexis. Thank you so much for your time on summer break to talk to us. And perhaps you could just tell us a little bit about what your role is at Oak Bay and what courses you're teaching or you have been teaching over the last few months.
Yeah, for sure. So I teach the junior science in the French Immersion program at Oak Bay. So the Sciences Naturelles 9 and Sciences Naturelles 10. And then I also teach a little bit of Français Langue at the grade 12 level.
Awesome. So
yeah.
What types of platform, like digital platforms had you been using prior to the pandemic, and what changed when that switch to the remote hybrid learning model came into place?
Yeah, for sure. So before kind of the remote learning period, I did use Google Classroom and kind of for the last few years have always had a classroom set up, but mainly relied on it as just a tool to kind of post assignments and have it be like an alternative to definitely get assignments submitted, but also to post some material. But I certainly wasn't kind of relying on it 100% of the time. I didn't use it as my only tool of delivery, or and I can't say that I always kept it super up to date. And so a lot of the Google Apps for Education or the G Suite tools like slides and docs I was using, but there was definitely a blend between doing stuff in class and having kids submit stuff kind of on paper, and then also having the option to submit digitally.
So the nice thing was you had those pieces in place. So once the students were working from home, you still had those communication pieces. You didn't have to start from scratch to build them.
Yeah.
Specifically referencing your Français Langue and your French Immersion teaching, I know it's always challenging to find French appropriate resources. It seems like there's never, it's just a constant act of translation for French teachers, English resources and transcribing them and translating them. But are there any French language platforms relating to science or to your Français Langue courses that you've been using over the last few months?
That's a good question. I would say it still continues to be just a gather resources, and sometimes you find them in French and it's a pleasant surprise, but I would say the majority of the time it's either using, like we do have in the science courses, the old curriculum textbook in French, the BC Science 9 and 10, but we can only pick and choose so much from that as the new curriculum has changed. So I can't say that there's a go-to, especially science-specific French resource that I've been using. It's definitely pulling stuff in English and then yeah, translating most of the time.
What would you say your engagement rate's been like with the students, and from the onset to the end of the year, and perhaps it's changed, or what would you say?
I was really actually pleasantly surprised, or I shouldn't say surprised, but I was really happy with the engagement level. Like I would say maybe anywhere from 85 to 90% engagement throughout my courses. I would maybe say that at the junior level, the engagement was higher than at the grade 12 level. Understandably, those grade 12s have some core academic courses that take priority, and though Français Langue is a core academic course, it maybe doesn't weigh as heavily as some of their, say, like senior sciences or English or socials that they're kind of relying on that grade to get into their post-secondary. And so, but engagement was quite high, and I know that's not the case for everyone, but it was really, really encouraging for me.
So what types of what types of activities and learning experiences were you supporting those students with? You're not in a lab, obviously, so you're probably going to look in other ways to hit some of those science targets. So what types of things have you been doing?
Definitely. I tried to, at the very start of all of this, it was kind of a lot to wrap your mind around, knowing that there are so many ways to deliver the content and so many ways to get kids engaged. So I would say I kind of landed on a bit of a schedule every week where I would send out material like notes in the form of a Google slide, and then have some optional activities. And usually those were the lab type activities, and whether they were doing it at home, they obviously had to be pretty simple labs, like stuff using just household equipment or household items, or simulations. There are a lot of great virtual labs, mostly in English, unfortunately, which again is a bit of a barrier, but that was usually kind of a supplementary thing that I thought if they wanted to go a little deeper with it or extend that knowledge a bit more, they could do those optional activities. And then the week always ended with some form of an assessment. And usually that was a Go Formative quiz or some type of research-based or kind of inquiry-based lab or project. And I think for me, it was really helpful to create kind of a consistent schedule and make sure that I was posting in a way that was predictable for the students. And I think just given some of the feedback that I got from the kids, they appreciated that too, just knowing that each week was kind of going to be structured in the same way, and they could then plan their time accordingly.
Yeah, consistency is key, isn't it? And we've talked about Go Formative a little bit in the past, but could you maybe share an example of specifically how Go Formative, what role that played in your assessment process? And for those folks that aren't familiar with the platform, maybe you can talk a little bit more about that.
For sure. Yeah. So Go Formative for me, I was brand new to it. I had never used it prior to the remote learning period. And I found it incredibly intuitive and really easy to use. It's basically, like a formative assessment platform where you can create quizzes from scratch, or you can actually pull in documents, quizzes that you've already created, maybe in a Word doc or in a Google Doc or in PDF form, and then create these quizzes that students can complete online. I certainly used it as more of a formative tool and had them kind of try and retry the quiz as many times as they wanted until they kind of felt confident and comfortable with it. But it also lends itself to kind of single entry only style assessment. I can actually, if you want, I can share the screen and so this is kind of what your formative like dashboard looks like. And what's really nice about it is that you can sync your Google Classroom with formative. And so it automatically will import all your classes, all your class lists, and there's a pretty handy kind of grade pass back, so you can actually assess it and grade it in Go Formative and then pass those grades back to Google Classroom. So if you're someone who kind of likes to grade things in Classroom and likes to have students see their grades in Classroom, that's really nice. So I kind of organized it by subject level, like Science 9, Science 10, and FRAL. And again, what I really love about it is that, let's say if I go into this Punnett Square quiz, It's a super easy to use platform. So you can create questions and all kinds of different question types. You can have an essay question, you can have a matching graphing, which is really handy for the sciences and maths. You can do like a numeric, and there's a numeric keyboard that you can use. And then down here is where you see enhance a PDF doc, Google Docs. So you can actually kind of import something that you've already created. And I know for a lot of people in this remote time, it was like, you have all these resources that you've spent so much time creating, and to feel like you have to reinvent the wheel is frustrating for sure. So yeah, it was super user friendly. And then, you assign to as many classes as you want, and it can either kind of create a Google Classroom post for you, or you can just take the link and post it in Classroom the way you want. But for me, the most, I think, helpful or kind of eye-opening aspect of this program is seeing the responses. So you can kind of view the responses by class, and again, there'll be some names in here, but you can look at it kind of per question, so questions 1, 2, 3, or just get this total view where you see the kids' responses. You can see pretty clearly, where there were issues, where people struggled. And then when you go into an individual kind of question, there's an opportunity to give immediate feedback. So if someone struggled with a question, I try my best to go in immediately, give them some feedback so that they could try it again. And when I go to my classes view, my tracker view here, I can just look at any given class and see all of the results. So for each of the quizzes they did, and for me, it was really nice to be able to see a lot of green. I felt like that was the goal, was to just have them try and have multiple submissions, because in my kind of assessment, in my grade book, I just treated it as a formative assessment. So it was more just a learning check-in as opposed to an actual quiz.
So to clarify, so if they were to redo something based on your feedback, would the color then change to green? Like, would it progress?
It would, yeah. And formative is incredibly, powerful. As a department, I'll go back to Science 10 here. As a department, our department had purchased a Teams account. So we were kind of given a bunch of features to formative that you wouldn't have on the free version. But for example, if you're grading a quiz, and you've created an answer key, but let's say it's a short answer question, and so the wording has to be exactly so in order to give them the points for it. You could go back and in a given quiz accept a certain answer, and then Go Formative will actually add that to your answer key and then go through and remark where maybe someone had a similar answer or the exact same answer and give them the mark as well. So it's super powerful stuff, and I really enjoyed using it.
So if it were, you're kind of almost like building a database of possible responses, and then
For sure.
Can you reuse those questions again with a future class easily enough?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I go into my formatives here, they kind of live as a quiz, and then I can assign them to whatever class I want. So if I go in here to this quiz and I want to assign it to someone, it still exists. I can go and assign it to another block at another time.
That's great. That you're not reinventing the wheel every year once you put that initial work in to build that assessment.
Yeah, for sure.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Are there any other ones specifically relating to your Francais Langue that you'd like to show, or any other Google Classroom aspects or anything like that?
Yeah, I guess one other thing that I found that I kind of started doing organizationally for myself to kind of wrap my head around the planning and the kind of long-term, just what would these 7 or 8 weeks look like. I started making an agenda, a weekly agenda, just using a Google slide. So this is my grade 9 science, and it's not necessarily fun. Also, the first week, I sent out this agenda to each of my blocks, and these Google Slides just kind of stayed as living docs. And each week on the Monday, I would post them, and it was like, here's week 1. and then I'd create this table that was kind of organized in what are the key learnings, and then the PowerPoint of like notes. The material for that week is linked. What are some helpful videos that you could check out if you're struggling or you need a little more information, or some of them were just like for interest's sake. What are some optional activities that you could do? So those were those hands-on labs or simulations that they could do just as kind of a bonus optional thing. And then what's kind of due, or what's the assessment for the week. And so I tried to link as much of this stuff as possible so that this could be kind of their go-to almost landing page. And I'd also had in like for the 9s and 10s, I felt, especially at the start, like it might be helpful for them to have a bit of a roadmap of like, what do I want you to do first? And then what do I want you to do next? And kind of guide them through it. And so I know for me, it was helpful to kind of plan in this way, but I think from the feedback I got from many students, it was also helpful to have it laid out in that way. And I know that even parent feedback, that time management piece was pretty hard for some kids. And so I think for me, it felt like a pretty useful tool, and it's something that I'll definitely continue to do.
That's great. Yeah,
Yeah.
real win-win. Now, looking back though, let's say a teacher were wanting to get started with a couple of these platforms in September.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything you would have done differently, or were there any things that you tried that maybe didn't quite turn out as you had anticipated that you'd change or adjust if you're giving advice to somebody else?
One thing that I felt didn't quite pan out the way I thought it would was offering some kind of optional office hours throughout. And I didn't do it from the very start. I kind of started a bit later on, maybe in like the 4th week, I started offering optional Zoom kind of office hours. And I tried to have students sign up through a Google form and kind of let me know beforehand, what do you need some help with? And to no fault of theirs, students would say they were going to show up and then not quite follow through.
Life happens.
So it would end up being, me sitting on a Zoom call waiting for kids to show, and only a handful would of those who said they were going to. So I do realize though that kind of later on in remote learning, when we were in at Oak Bay, anyways, our kind of curriculum completion time, those Zoom meetings that I had specifically set up with certain kids, and I had emailed them and contacted them and said, hey, I really need you to come and meet with me on a Zoom call, even if just for 5 minutes. That was really helpful. And some of the time it would be me sitting and actually like guiding someone through a specific assignment. So I think that those Zoom kind of calls can be really meaningful, especially when it's hard to connect and we're kind of missing that connection in class. So that's something I might do differently in the future. I might kind of create appointments and specifically ask students that I know would benefit from it, as opposed to putting the onus totally on them. Yeah.
This is fantastic. Is there any sort of last additional thoughts or resources or tips or tricks you'd like to share before we wrap things up?
The only other thing I might share that I found helpful was how I kind of posted things in my classroom. So prior to COVID or the remote learning, I would have topics for each kind of unit that we did. And at the start of remote learning, I thought, maybe in my classwork page, I would just create a topic for e-learning and post per week. And I feel like that was, again, a nice kind of one-stop shop. Students weren't searching or looking for that post that I maybe, created and got lost somewhere in the stream. So I would post each week. And again, I would link that agenda. I would link the notes. I would link any project that they were doing. And then I also found rubrics very handy. It was kind of my first experience with Google rubrics, but it was, really helpful and really awesome to use. So I would say that is kind of my last little tidbit. And I feel pretty fortunate that at Oak Bay, in our science department, we're a pretty collaborative group. And that was also very helpful at the start when there's so much information flying around to have people to bounce ideas off of. And I feel pretty fortunate in that sense too.
Awesome. Yeah, that collaboration is key. It makes such a difference in cohesion in a department. That's great.
For sure. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time this morning. I really appreciate the little glimpse into your remote learning world, and I'm hoping some other Francais Langue and other French science teachers in the district will find this information really useful.
Well, great. Well, thank you very much for having me.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.